Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. So our program is about to begin. My name is Mark Wright, class of '89. I work at King 5 in Seattle as the midday and early evening news anchor. You know what? As I look around the room, and I want to encourage all of you students, as I look around the room, I really do see people that I consider to be as close to me as my family. Glenn Johnson, my former professor and mentor, Mayor of Pullman, and as I look around the room, you guys are really like family, and it starts here, and it starts now. Cherish these friendships that you're making now, because 20, 30 years from now, you'll be back up here helping future generations of journalists. This is it's been an exciting couple of days, and I hope you've gotten a lot out of this, students. This is the 42nd Murrow Symposium. As I was walking through the Murrow display in the Gertsen building, it's an amazing display when you think about the history there, that you can stand there and look at the door that Ed Murrow had at CBS in New York. And if you think about not only that, but the journalist that Ed Murrow was and continues to be in terms of his inspiration today. You guys, I'm just going to say it straight out. Journalism, the free press in America is under attack. Literally under attack. The leader of the free world has declared that we are the enemy of the American people. When I heard that, my jaw hit the floor. I've never heard a more dangerous statement made by anyone in political leadership in our country. You know, the natural reaction would be to fight back, but we'll learn more in some of our panels later today about what our response needs to be. And what it really comes down to is our response needs to be what it was when Ed Murrow fought Senator Joseph McCarthy in the 1950s. The dynamic is the same. The fear is the same. The fight is the same. The attack on journalists is the same. It's very similar to what's happening today. And our response really comes back to one thing. That's truth and fairness and accuracy. What we've always stood for will get us through this. We have to be fair. We have to give credit to the administration where it deserves it. If we don't, we're going to be perceived as biased. So let's do our jobs. It was interesting. New Year's Eve, opened my phone, got a text message from my friend Dorothy Bullitt. Dorothy is a dear friend of mine in Seattle, Rotary. Her grandmother founded King 5 Television. The subject line on her email was "Our Murrow Moment." So, it was a link to an article in the Daily Beast that talked about our Murrow moment. And I just want to read a couple of quotes that were in that article because I think it's really relevant to today. What would Ed Murrow say today if he were here, given the current state of affairs? And I would say he would probably say exactly what he said in the spring of 1954. When he confronted, at great peril, Senator Joseph McCarthy. He said, quote, "We must not confuse dissent with disloyalty. Accusation is not proof, and a conviction depends on evidence. We will not be driven by fear into an age of unreason." And I'm paraphrasing now. "We are not descendants of fearful people who were afraid to write and speak about causes which were, for the moment, unpopular." This is our Murrow moment. And I mean that. I don't think there's a more important time that we need good, solid journalists in this country. You're the next generation, and we're relying on you to continue the fight. So I'm so grateful that you're here. I'm glad that you're a Coug. I couldn't be more happy to have our next speaker come up. Interim Dean Bruce Pinkleton, come on up. And as Bruce comes up, just want to encourage you to give a warm welcome. My favorite kind of leaders are not the ones that run around yelling at you. My favorite kind of leaders are people who are quietly inspirational and thoughtful people and inspire you in that way to be a better person. And that's Bruce. And the job that he's done for our college has been phenomenal. Bruce, thank you.
Thanks, Mark, very much. I appreciate your kind words, and thank you for your response. That was very much appreciated. So we have had a tremendous symposium, I have to be honest. I just about limp into these 2 days because they just take so much out of us to prepare for it. And this day has been so energizing. I've been running around hearing panelists speak, former students speak, seeing full houses for these panelists. Guys, I was hearing advice. I was finding myself, I wanted to make notes, and I found myself thinking, I wish somebody had given me this advice 30 years ago. I would not be making the same mistakes I'm still making today. The advice was outstanding. I mean, really, really good stuff. I was just so pleased. A lot of this is from former students of mine, former students of our faculty here. We have Glenn Johnson here. I've seen a lot of former students, a lot of excitement about that. So there's a lot of excitement here, and just so pleased about what's happening and the energy that I see around the Murrow Symposium. It's just been a terrific day, and it really reminds me of the power of Murrow education to transform a life, basically. One of our strengths, our wheelhouse, is a transformative education, and this confirms for me that we are doing that in the Murrow College. So very, very excited about that. One of our very special guests is First Lady Noel Schultz, and Noel is an accomplished power engineer. So before she and Kirk ever arrived in Pullman, she was working with Schweitzer Engineering doing her own research, and is very successful in her own right, is a champion of women in science. Heard her do an outstanding presentation on Women's Day here at WSU in February, and I was taking notes myself. It was tremendous, and I'd like her to come up and say a few words for us. Noel? And I want to add, just as an aside, that Noel is a tremendous supporter of the Murrow College on Twitter. So get your handle going, because she's a Twitter buddy. And I'm not making that up. Her dog supports us. It's amazing. So.
Thank you. I don't have as much practice as all of you speaking, so I'll put the mic up. But it really is an honor for me to be here today. I was thinking about, wow, Dean Pinkleton's got a real risk here having an engineer speaking to a communications group, but I'll try to hold up my end of the deal there. But really, our Murrow College of Communication has a legacy of being a leader in communication and continues that legacy today where it's even more important, as has been mentioned by some of the speakers. As we move Washington State University, we have a goal we're aspiring to is the Drive to 25, which is a goal to be a top 25 public research institution by the year 2030. And the Murrow College is a big part of that in helping us move forward, both formally for the classes and research and activities, but informally also on how we communicate about the great things that Washington State University does. But I really appreciate Interim Dean Bruce Pinkleton for his support and for inviting me here, and his leadership in the college in the transition recently. And as we've heard today, he's doing a great job of getting our alumni, getting our students involved. So let's thank him for all his efforts. So one of the things I think, people always wonder when an engineer becomes president, what does that mean in other fields? But I think you can feel comfortable that the new president understands, well, he's still a new president in his first year, understands communications. Because one of his first acts here of leadership was to develop the first vice president for marketing communications for Washington State. And that position has been filled with Phil Weiler, and he will start on May 1st, and we're very excited. And I think the Murrow College will be one of the most impacted colleges, not just for the publicity of the great things you're doing, but also for opportunities for our faculty, staff, and students to be involved in internships, to be involved in class projects, and other things for us to get our brand of Washington State University out more. We've done a great job of training students and alums to go out and tell the story about other people, but we can do a better job of telling other people about the great things Washington State is doing, and that's one of the things we'll be doing in the future. On a personal note, I really think it's important, as an engineer, one of our challenges is people don't always think engineers can communicate. And Kirk has a joke he likes to tell that the way you tell an outgoing engineer is they look at your shoes instead of their own. So I can tell engineer jokes since I'm the engineer in the audience, right? But one of the things that's happening as engineers and scientists, we're really good about telling engineers and scientists about the great things we're doing. But we're not as good at being able to explain it to the general public. And this is where communicators like our students, our faculty, staff, and alums in the audience can be that translator to help engineers and scientists explain to the general public the impact of the activities, the opportunities and the challenges of technology, and how we work together to move that forward. So I think it's very important, and we have a new Dean of Engineering coming into the Voiland College of Engineering and Architecture, and I see great opportunities in the future for our two colleges to work together to not only highlight what's happening at Washington State, but help the general public know more and more about science and technology and understand it. So I really am looking forward to those opportunities. So as I finish, like everyone, I want to have a Murrow quote. And as was mentioned before, I think communication is more important now than ever. And the opportunity for you all to be here today is the opportunity to be a part of that's happening and make a difference. And that's one of the things I think is great about the Murrow College is our opportunity to work with our students to help them be impactful yet ethical, and to be able to share those stories in a way that any audience through any media can learn and make a difference in their understanding. So my quote for my Murrow quote is, "Just once in a while, let us exalt the importance of ideas and information." So I am now going to introduce the next speaker, who doesn't need any introduction to this group, but Dr. Glenn Johnson, who is a professor emeritus in the Murrow College, as well as the voice of the Cougs. He's going to introduce our keynote speaker. But before I ask him to come up, I just want to share my appreciation to Glenn for his role as mayor of Pullman and his efforts to work with WSU and work with Kirk and the other leaders of WSU to help enhance and advance our town-gown relationship. And it's been a great partnership. We're well on our way with many opportunities to come. So now please help me welcome Glenn Johnson to the podium.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. How are you? That way you just spruce this place up a little bit. I'm not going to do a Cougar first down because we're going to have plenty of those this year. But first of all, I commend Bruce for having Noel Schultz speak today as an engineer, because without engineers, Mark wouldn't be on the air, nor would I, or Dana, or Anna, or anybody else. It's engineers that keep broadcasting stations on the air, and especially power. So, Noel, thank you very much. And I, too, also want to commend the Schultzes when they arrived here. I think it was within about 3 weeks, I got the call that I could have a one-on-one meeting with Kirk Schultz. We talked about a lot of things, about the city and his vision, and I'll tell you, the Schultzes are super coming to town because they are visiting our restaurants, and then they tweet about it, and then they do some other things, and they tweet about it. And we have had at least 3 meetings so far of the Town Gown Collaborative. And we also have that broken down into about 5 different committees. We're doing a number of projects. One of them you'll see, not quite in the next month or so, but you're going to see coming to town eventually, Pullman next 3 exits. Yeah, we finally got there. Okay. You know, right now it's like Pullman, Davis Way, you're there. And then we have a sign that says Pullman, Washington State University. It doesn't even say welcome. So we're going to have, and it should be done this summer. I've been working on this one for quite a while, and WSU is a partner, SEL is a partner, the Chamber and the city are all partners. We're going to have a welcome wayside that'll actually have the word welcome in about 60 different languages. because this is an international community. And we've been working on this for a while. We've got the partnership going. So where the old daily grind was, coming in on Davis Way, for some of you, maybe Burgerville, and I at least got that building down. I heard from alums coming down from Spokane and said, Glenn, man, that's ugly coming to the town. Okay, we got that one taken care of. But we still have a few more other projects. And we got some great things happening, not only with the airport, where we're doing a $119 million project to realign the runway. We have 4 flights a day now to Seattle out of here, 6 days a week. And we will have even more coming. So that project's supposed to be done by 2019. And again, working with WSU, Schweitzer, and everybody else, we've got a lot of progress. Well, it's my privilege today to introduce a former student of mine, Anna Cabrera. And Bruce, first of all, thank you for inviting me to do this. Now, maybe after I talk to you, you probably say, I'm sorry, I didn't. Should have had some other much shorter here. But one of the joys of teaching here, and I taught here for 35 years. My last class was 2014. I taught a management class. And one of the joys is watching students progress, whether it's in that semester, whether it's in the time they're here at WSU, or professionally. And let me tell you, there was no secret that Anna Cabrera was going to be successful. No secret whatsoever. You could see the talent there. I think one of the biggest frustrations a faculty member has is when you have students with talent and ability, and yet they don't put the effort in. They just sort of cruise. Unfortunately, they use the new technology, adaptive cruise control. So the person in front of them starts slowing down, they slow down too. That's not the way to get there. I used to tell my students, you don't make the cut by being, I'm striving to be average. No, you don't want to strive to be average, you strive above that. And that's what Anna Cabrera did in classes. Now, she was on an athletic scholarship. She was a distance runner. So, I mean, every day, 5, 6, 10, 15 miles, 20 perhaps. Maybe ran over to Moscow and back, I don't know. But anyway, she was always running. But she was always working in her classes. We would have meetings together, and she would contact me, and I always appreciated her time management skills. Because she would come to me and she said, okay, next week, do you have any time on Thursday? Yeah, we can do that. We sit down, we look at her tape, look at her anchoring, look at some of her packages, but always planning ahead because she had to be on the road with the track team or other classes. She minored in foreign languages, major was in broadcast. So you always knew that she had that ability, and you knew that she was going to do well. She interned in Denver at Channel 7, then came back to classes. And again, a high level of work. When I was teaching, we did the newscasts live. That's the way it should be done. And Marvin and I sweated out many newscasts together, and we consoled each other many times. But by the, about the 5th week, they were getting the act together, and we set a high standard. One of the things I learned years ago is if you set a low standard, students will meet it. If you set a high standard, they'll meet that too. But you have to, make them do that. And again, they eventually benefit because of that. Well, Anna Cabrera set high standards for herself at all times. So from here, she went to KHQ and KAYU and worked with Dana. And there, I could have friends of mine saying, Anna Cabrera, one of yours? I said, yeah. She's not going to be there long. I said, yeah, I know that too. And sure enough, went to Denver and anchored in Denver and won a number of different awards, including some Emmys. And from there, then CNN got her. Got her as a correspondent out of Denver. And she did a number of stories with CNN. And because she was so great, they said, the #1 market in the country needs you, Anna. I'm sure her agent negotiated that pretty well. Good, hope so. We were just talking. I said, I wish I was the agent for some of these students. I would have retired really comfortably. But again, hey, we're here for you. So anyway, from there, CNN in New York, and you can see, I just love looking at the TV guide, CNN News with Anna Cabrera. Ladies and gentlemen, Anna Cabrera.
Boy, how do I follow that? What a buildup. I'm like even more nervous than I was before, Glenn, because you set that expectation now so high just like you did in class. First of all, hello, Cougs. Go, Cougs. You know, this place is so special. I really feel like I'm among friends and family, and perhaps that makes me feel like, you know, I really want this to mean something to you in our time together today. If you're a student here, I hope you realize just how lucky you are. You probably don't. It's easy to take for granted the opportunities that you have here, but you have such a plethora of opportunities. I mean, to have the professors here at WSU, the resources, the technology, and just the abundance of knowledge at Washington State University, but especially in the Murrow College of Communication. That is something special. Do not take it for granted, and do not take the opportunities for granted. Don't let them pass. Seize them. Seize them every day and every year and every semester, and by being here, you're doing just that. So I know I'm preaching to the choir right now. But you know, it's amazing to come back on campus because it feels like in some ways I never left. I actually graduated back in 2004, and I'm thinking, doing the math was never my strong suit. 13 years ago. Makes me feel really old, but yeah, I have such vivid memories of my time here. It feels like just yesterday. I loved this place. And, you know, I started thinking back, and all this nostalgia is setting in as I'm walking around campus. And I remember participating in Cable 8, and you know, I was in Studio A and Studio B just in the last day or so, and you know, all those memories come rushing back. I hosted a movie critic show. I'm not surprised that one didn't stick around and didn't last. I also directed a sports program called Inside the Lines. Is that one still around by chance? Does that sound familiar to anybody? Oh, that's kind of sad. I thought that one had some legs. You know, I ran cross country and track, as Glenn mentioned, and so sports were kind of important to me. And this was like a sports news magazine, kind of the convergence of news and athletics. And of course, I really learned the ropes, so to speak, turning stories, doing that rotation from on air to behind the camera for Cable 8 News and Broadcasting 465. The legendary Glenn Johnson was still teaching class back then. Lucky me. I learned linear and nonlinear editing, tape to tape and digital. Do you guys still learn tape to tape? No? I can't say I'm surprised, but there I go again, dating myself. If you can believe it, digital editing and equipment wasn't the standard back then. It goes to show just how fast this industry is evolving. I mean, it's hard enough just to keep up with the technology and the technological advancements. So I graduated and I got my first job at KHQ TV in Spokane. And how did I get there from here in that one leap? I went to the Murrow Symposium and participated in the workshops. And it wasn't with the intention of making that contact that would give me my first job. But I remember this day. I think I had finished a class and I had forgotten it was the Murrow Symposium day. And I looked, it was like 2 in the afternoon, and I realized that it was the Murrow Symposium. And I think the only thing left was the resume critiquing portion of the symposium. So I quickly printed my resume. I had prepared it. I had planned to go to the symposium, but somehow that slipped through the cracks. I wasn't as organized as Glenn perhaps thought I was. Fake it till you make it. That's the name of the game sometime. And so anyway, I brought my resume to that critiquing session, and I met a woman named Tracy Zaravicka. Now, she is the news director currently at KHQ. At the time, she was an assistant news director, and I just happened to sit down at her table and handed her my resume, and we had a nice connection. And she gave me some advice, and I said, hey, I'd like to keep in touch. I am working on my video resume, and I would love to be able to send it to you to critique as well. And she agreed that that would be okay. And so that's what I did. And when I went to graduate, I didn't have a job lined up. I had disseminated my video resume to a number of stations in different places, you know, more of the starter markets. I always thought, how cool would it be to work in Spokane? You know, when you're in Pullman, that's the news you get. I liked what I saw there. I liked you know, that it was a medium-sized market, and I called Tracy up before I graduated, like the week before, and I said, hey, I'm leaving. I'm from Colorado, so I don't know when I'm coming back, but I'd love to work in Spokane someday, perhaps. May I swing by and say hello, have you take a look at my resume tape, provide some feedback, and let's just keep in touch? And she said, sure. So I drove over there, and as it turned out, they had a reporter opening. And so I applied, and I got the job. They decided to take a chance on me, and that never would have happened if Tracy and I didn't already have a relationship. And so, again, it goes to show you never know who you're going to meet, and it really does pay off to take a chance, to put yourself out there. Now, when I got that job at Spokane, in Spokane at KHQ, I remember thinking, yes, I made it. I'm starting in a medium-sized market, only to be put in my place pretty quickly. I soon realized the pace, the daily deadlines, you know, the elements that were out of my control, like trying to get interviews around other people's schedules, trying to get people to talk to me who were either camera shy, worse yet, something tragic had happened to them. There was a lot of pressure. And at the beginning, it was incredibly overwhelming. In fact, I remember going to work to the station with a pit of anxiety in my stomach pretty much every day for like the first 6 months, thinking, boy, I sure hope I can pull this off today. And those of you who were some of my greatest cheerleaders here at WSU, Bruce, Glenn, Marvin, you probably remember seeing me stumble and bumble through a number of live shots when I first started. I was so nervous, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the job and the intensity of the spotlight. And I did wonder at one point, am I cut out for this work? At the beginning, I was filled with self-doubt. You know, everybody makes mistakes, nobody's perfect. But to be putting yourself out there in a job in which your mistakes are exposed for viewers to judge, it was kind of scary. And, you know, during that time when I was kind of a nervous Nelly, this was, for some reason, this moment also stands out to me. And perhaps it's because when I reflect back, I think, why did I ever care about that? But I was reporting on March Madness and the Gonzaga basketball team, and it was a Saturday morning, and I was in one of the top 20 sports bars in the country, and I tried to say that in my live shot, and instead I said sports bras instead of sports bars. And I just remember feeling so embarrassed and so humiliated, and yet now I look back and I think, sheesh, that's the least of the mistakes I've made. But practice, 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 and patience, and perseverance, and persistence. I mean, that really is what helped to get me through some of the bumps along the way at the beginning, and then as, you know, I've continued to progress throughout my career. And so if you remember nothing more from this talk, please remember this. This business, and really doesn't matter which angle, which part of communications you're pursuing, it takes courage. And I heard Anna this morning use that word, and it is so true. You know, journalism is not for the faint of heart. It's not about getting rich or famous. When I first started in Spokane, I was making $24,000 a year, and my dad, who's been an educator, couldn't believe I was making less than a first-year teacher salary. But that's not why we do it. It's about doing work that is truly meaningful, that makes an impact. It's an impact on an individual's life, on your community, on your state, your country, and if you work really, really hard, you can make an impact on the world, and that is incredibly rewarding. But that's what this is about. That's what true journalists are about. And I have to say, Mark talked a little bit about this. Being a journalist right now has never been more challenging, and it's never felt more important. I have never felt such conviction for the job and the duty of true investigative reporting, especially given the current political and social climate we're in right now. You know, part of our job as journalists, the role of the free press, is to be a government watchdog. And so I think that's why we're particularly attuned to the current situation. You know, the current administration at times has worked to delegitimize some of the work we do, to discredit some of the other mainstream news organizations. And so what's been really crystallized to me is that credible news media is essential right now. And right now we are being tested big time. You know, it's not about politics. Journalism should not be political. This transcends politics. This is about truth. And when you have the current administration putting out a message that at times is factually inaccurate, it is my job as a journalist to say that's not true. Such as these claims that we've heard of millions of people voting illegally in the election. There's no evidence of that. The most recent claim that has no evidence to back up is this claim that the former president of the United States, President Obama, wiretapped the current president's phones during the election. That would have been illegal, and again, at this point, there's no evidence that that actually happened. And so again, I come back to my job as a journalist to do this public service as a government watchdog is to point out when that message is not true. Now, people in positions of power, no doubt, for a long time have targeted news organizations because they want to control the message. This can happen regardless of what party's in power. It can also apply to people who are not political as well, or not in political positions. But again, right now is a time in which we're being tested. It's about, you know, I provide some of these examples to just kind of illustrate, again, the role of a journalist to publicly vet policies, rhetoric, ideas, people, to dig deeper, to ask probing questions. It's about the truth. And it's also about upholding our democracy and the role of the free press. This is something that is as relevant today as it has ever been. As journalists, we have access to situations, to information, to people that the average citizen doesn't always get. And so it's our responsibility and our privilege to uncover wrongdoings, to shed light on disheartening situations or terrible realities like what we're seeing happening right now in Syria. It's our job to inform, to educate, to give a voice to the oppressed or the marginalized. And above all, it's about finding and expressing the truth. But to do our job effectively, credibility is crucial. You've got to get it right. And so that's why your professors ding you on your assignments. I was talking to some students who said, was it COM 300, in which everybody just cringes because you get knocked down if you misspell somebody's name. I know you think they're being nitpicky. I did too. That ruined my GPA. I was going to have a 4.0 if I didn't get that A- in that class. But I'm not bitter about it. But bottom line, the details, they do matter. And in real life, you know, I'm not saying mistakes can't happen. I have made my fair share. There is no doubt about it. But as journalists and as communicators, it is our duty to double down on getting things right, to make sure our reports are factual, accurate, and as complete as possible. Because no matter what you do, be prepared. People are going to criticize, especially in this age of social media. How many of you use social media? Show of hands. Just about everybody in this room. Twitter and Facebook, these can be awesome outlets to deliver information as journalists. But they can also be places where people of all opinions can cast judgment, can spew hate, and can do it in an anonymous way. These are digital spaces where our mistakes can be seized upon, shared, and then amplified. And social media provides a platform where truly fake news, falsehoods can spread like wildfire, whether intentional or not. You know, these are places where people can post so-called news or retweet so-called news that they didn't vet or fact check, but maybe it's what they want to believe, or it helps to drive an agenda. In fact, just recently we learned that, and this is part of the intelligence community's investigation, and a conclusion they've drawn as they've been investigating Russia's hacking and meddling in the US election, that one of the strategies Russia used to disrupt the last election was to deploy thousands of people who were literally pumping out fake news stories. They also had these bots that were helping to create news, fake news, and then disseminating it on social media. And their purpose was to create questions about our election process. And Senator Mark Warner, who is a co-chair of the Senate's investigation in the Senate intelligence community, says, you know, they were trying to undermine our democracy. And so there's that intentional side of spreading fake news. And then on the other hand, sometimes our best intentions to stop the spread of fake news can backfire. It's kind of an interesting article. I don't know if you had a chance to see it in Time magazine not too long ago, their recent cover story titled, "Is Truth Dead?" And in that article, let me find this quote. It says, this is what they write: "In the radical democracy of social media, even the retweets of outraged truth squatters has the effect of rebroadcasting false messages because controversy elevates message." So I share that with you because I think it illustrates how important it is to really think before you post or before you retweet. Here's something else to think about. Where do you get your news? How many of you get your news online? How many of you watch local news on TV? How many of you watch cable news? Oh, come on, get those hands up there. How many of you get your news from Facebook? Don't be bashful. I know a lot of us do that as well. Well, Pew Research Center did a study recently to ask this very question, and they surveyed 2,000 US adults, asking them twice a day for a week how they find and consume news, and their findings are really telling. They found, one, participants who said their news came from Facebook. Most of the time, they could not tell you which news outlet produced the original news report. The other thing they found was that younger news consumers had less source awareness. And the third thing that stuck out to me was about 2/3, 65% of the people who said they were primarily online news consumers had just one preferred pathway for getting their news and information. So that tells me that there's not a lot of diversification, and there really is not a lot of vetting going on. So I come back to this world of social media where anybody can post or write just about anything, where anybody online can start their own website or their own blog. And the source of news really does matter. And so this is why it's really important as journalists and as communicators to stand firm and to help define what real news is. Now, here at WSU, you learn about journalistic ethics, right? You learn that We must be objective. We must strive for fairness and balance. It's important to include different opinions, different sides of a story. And so I've struggled a lot lately, especially in the current political climate, with the question of how do I do all of that? How do I do my job right and to the best of my ability? And I've found a very simple answer. Stick to the facts. Let the facts lead reporting. If the facts point one way and people who don't like the facts try to suggest otherwise, I have to call a spade, and I must do so vigorously. So to put it very simply, if somebody in a position of power says Washington State just fell into the ocean, and it didn't, it's my job to say that's not true. And in doing so, yeah, I'm pushing back, but I'm not being biased. I'm just stating a fact. So remember, stick to the facts. But to do that, you've got to follow the evidence, wherever it may lead. Don't have preconceived notions of what you think are the facts. You know, it's a little like being an investigator or a detective. You know, you look into what the facts are, but you cannot be distracted by the fake news that's here. You have to relentlessly pursue the truth without getting distracted, without letting people with their own self-serving agendas muddle what the truth is. And if you take it one step further, I really liked what my colleague Christiane Amanpour said. She's like, you know, this wise woman in the industry. She's been along a long time and epitomizes what a true journalist is. And she says, be truthful, not neutral. Think about that statement. You can apply that statement, especially in current times, to rhetoric or actions that may be perceived as bigoted or racist, discriminatory, misogynistic. We cannot just turn a blind eye to it, but we also cannot be a venue through which that kind of rhetoric is propagated and disseminated without calling it out for what it is and pushing back against it. Because if you don't point it out and push back on that kind of messaging, then we normalize it. Did you know that hate crimes have been on the rise? In fact, so far this year, there have been at least 35 reports of threats, of arson and vandalism at mosques around the country. This is according to some statistics that were compiled by CAIR, the Council of American Islamic Relations. And by their count, that's almost double the number of all of these types of incidents that happened in all of last year. So how we cover what's happening in our communities, in our states, our country, and around the world really does matter. Let's remember, journalism is a public service. What we say, what we broadcast, what we don't say or don't broadcast, it does have an impact. And so it's our job and our duty to say so when something isn't right. It's our job to hold people in positions of power accountable, Democrats, Republicans, unaffiliated, independents, and people who aren't politicians as well. Think doctors, lawyers, religious leaders, CEOs. Because when we don't, it's too easy for our society to slip into something other than a democracy. Just think of these places and countries where there is not a free press, and journalists that expose truths that show fallacy or corruption, or even just question the actions or rhetoric of a government, end up locked up, ostracized, even killed. Think Iran, North Korea, Russia. So, be brave and stick to the facts. But to do that, you have to know what the facts are. And that means you should vet your sources, cross-check information, do your own fact checks, weigh the credibility of different experts on a subject. At CNN, we have a group called The Row. And so all of the content that ends up on air or online goes through this group of people. They are senior editors, producers, sometimes our media ethics and legal experts also take a look at some of the stories we're turning. So those are all of my scripts, all of my packages that end up on air or online, or my written pieces that I do for CNN.com are getting an extra set of eyes. These people are checking for facts. They're asking me questions and making sure I asked the right questions, or that making sure my information is all in context. And I have to admit, this can be a pain. This slows me down when I'm under deadline. It can be frustrating at times, but sometimes they catch mistakes. Sometimes it helps me to look at my story from a different perspective that I hadn't thought of myself. And ultimately, it's a good thing. My stories end up that much stronger. And it also gives me a chance to think more deeply about the news reporting process. And so I fall back on that old slogan, always remind myself, 2 heads are better than 1. Because none of us knows everything. In fact, it's funny, the longer I'm in this business, the more I realize how much I don't know. I still feel like a student. I still feel like I have so much to learn. I mean, that's the beauty, I guess, of my chosen profession, journalism. You can never know enough. You can never be prepared enough. And that's a good thing. I actually find it really invigorating. Instead of, it getting old, my job just gets that much more interesting. I feel that much more drawn in. I mean, this is a great profession. It is meaningful. It is rewarding. And to succeed in this business, by any standard, you just cannot lose that thirst for knowledge and an unapologetic pursuit of information, pursuit of the truth. I want to end with a quote as well from Edward R. Murrow, which I think really, really resonates with me today. I quote, "American traditions and the American ethic require us to be truthful. But the most important reason is that truth is the best propaganda and lies are the worst. To be persuasive, we must be believable. To be believable, we must be credible. To be credible, we must be truthful. It is as simple as that." Thank you, and good luck, and go Cougs!
How about another round of applause for Anna? You are a credit to the Murrow College. Thank you so much. I want you to hang tight here for just a sec as we wrap things up. Thank you so much to the board, our sponsors today, the Symposium Committee, Interim Dean Pinkleton, Noel Schultz, all others who have made the symposium a success. Thank you so much. This afternoon, we've got more panels, so I encourage you to stick around. If you see a professional who's not doing anything, strike up a conversation. You never know where that's going to lead. So enjoy the rest of your time. Remember, you can share your photos to the Guidebook app and also your social media posts with Symposium, hashtag Symposium42. Let's bring back up Dean Pinkleton to close things out. Thank you so much.
All right. I want to thank. That was just tremendous. I was just so pleased, so impressed, and so proud. Frankly, we have a tremendous group of alumni whose work is equally important in their venues as well, and we're as proud of them also. So thank you all so much for what you do, for what you mean to us, and thank you for coming and presenting. We truly appreciate it. We have a small token of our appreciation. Mark, you want to come over and join us? All right, everybody, we have a terrific afternoon of panels, so don't go away. I'm going to have one shout out. This is crass commercialism. However, we have a new e-store with Murrow gear in it, and if you take a look right over here to my right, your left, you'll see a table, And there's all kinds of cool things, including a nifty sweater vest that a dean should wear, as a matter of fact, on occasions when he's perhaps not wearing a tie, which he hates, but don't tell the presidents. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, there's a great table over there, and there's a coupon for 20% off if you purchase by April 16th. All right, awesome. Hey, thank you guys so much. Have a great afternoon. Go Cougs!